I have been diligently practicing drawing little by little for a while now, and I felt that the time for me to start practicing my ultimate goal, animation, had already come. But there was a problem. Because I hadn't done any animation as a hobby before, I had no starting point of reference. So I thought I would first animate something as some sort of a benchmark to compare with down the line. This endeavor of mine got dragged way longer than it should have, and it felt like a big exercise on its own. But despite the amount of times I had to humble myself and settle down, I am finally finished with it. And I just wanted to go through what I have done for the past month and a half regarding it, because a lot went down. The first decision I had to make was regarding which app I was going to use. I usually use Procreate to draw, but it's a bit finicky to use for animation. It has layer limits which make it annoying to do sketch passes and separate the... So I was looking for other options that I had. My first choice was to use Rough Animator. It is a very basic animation app that has most of the necessities, which is great, but it didn't have a time-lapse option. I can't do a screen recording because it takes too much storage space. So unfortunately I had to give up on Rough Animator. Then the next option that I had was Flip-a-Clipped. I luckily had bought it before it went monthly payment. And I wouldn't recommend you buy the monthly payment. But what I realized was that it still had the spaghetti code from years back where they won't let you have one layer visible for the whole animation. But if you delete one layer from one frame, it will delete it from the whole animation. And I am a really forgetful person. I'm not going to remember that, and I'm definitely going to delete the whole animation accidentally. Which is not reversible, by the way. It doesn't work with undos. So I had to give up on that too, and what I was left with was the good old Procreate. Then I had to decide which action that I was going to animate, and what I wanted to do was either a push-up or a pull-up. I use those actions to visualize struggling when I make these videos, so I thought it would be fitting to animate them. I drew the body very unrealistic and cartoony because I thought it would make it easier, and as I sketched this animation, I realized that I really did not know how to make it fall to the ground. And I think what confused me even more was that I didn't mark down the perspective line, so I kept it vague, which made it harder for me to continue drawing, and I also did not have a ground plane. So those are the problems that this had, and I felt that this was way out of my league, so I quickly gave up on it. I humbled myself and decided to do a classic running animation. So this time around I established a ground plane, although it's a bit sketchy, but what happens here is that one, I'm very bad with directions, so I don't realize that the arms are supposed to go in the opposite direction of the legs. And they're also moving in really clunky ways. And the other thing is that the legs are supposed to go forward for there to be movement, but I don't realize that, and I make only the lower leg bend, which makes it look funny. And then I guess I hide the ground plane and forget that the legs need to go back and forth on the same line and not move around. So what happens is that I make it curve outwards as the legs become straight in the middle. And it makes the character look like it's flapping around instead of running. And I decide that surely the reason I wasn't able to get it was because of the brush. So I start from the scratch with a more pencil-like brush. With the pencil version, there are some improvements. For example, the upper leg goes a little bit further than it was before, and the arm movement is drawn better, although it's still in the wrong direction. But eventually, as I sketch more, I erase the layers and draw a version where the upper leg doesn't go as forward. And I think that makes me feel like that makes it look wrong, but I also forget what was the problem. So I decide to humble myself once again and and this time around blame the angle that I was drawing in. So I start from scratch once again from a flat side view. And it's almost as if that everything I've done up until this point is erased from the existence. The upper leg doesn't move at all. So it just looks funny like that. And I think I realized that the upper leg needs to move. But then I make it move forward and keep it that way for the whole movement, which is not the correct way either. So it just turns into a jumbled mess where I fix one problem but create another one. And I think this is where I realized that the arms need to be in the different directions. But this doesn't work out either, and once again I humble myself and blame the body type that I was using to draw. So I start drawing from scratch with a more realistic proportionate body, and I just double down on the upper legs not moving. So I just draw a forward leg position and only bend the lower legs. And then I humble myself once again and start animating a walking cycle. My first try at this looked like the character was kneading with their feet, like softly crushing something, and I try to fix it. But what I do is I make the feet move in an arc, which makes it look like it's a swinging thread instead of a walking feet. So then what I did was I showed what I was doing to someone around me, and they immediately started walking to test whatever action I was drawing. And what I didn't mention up until this point was that I had a no reference challenge. The reason for that rule was that I was fairly confident that I would be able to look at an already figured out walk cycle and draw a character on it, or draw that cycle from a different angle and then draw the character on it. The goal of this test was to see how well of a motion I would be able to come up with and not make a flashy first animation. And I was keeping my rule very hardcore, and I did not even walk around being aware of the motions that I was doing with my body to help me with this animation test. But since my rule was broken, I walked around myself too and tried to really pay close attention to what my body was doing. And I realized at that point that the reason my walking animation looked so wrong is that I belong to a subset of people that don't really make their feet go up as they walk. So once I figured out the feet usually go up when you walk, I paid close attention to that as I drew, and what I also tried to do was make the upper leg go forward, and as it comes back to more of a neutral position, I kept it pretty steady. And what I did was around that time frame I made the lower legs flap up, and I think that made it look good. Then I tried drawing the arms, and everything I've done up until this point has been erased once again. I just draw one bent arm and just swing it around without it changing positions or the joints moving at all. So it just looks very stiff and stupid. And then what I decided to do is just draw an arc and make circles move on it, and I didn't even draw the arms. Then there was a new decision that I had to make. So what I thought to do was that since I figured out the animation, what I could do is draw it from a cooler angle, and so that way I would brainwash myself into thinking that my first animation was better than it would actually be. So I would kind of hide the bad motion under a cooler angle. But I wasn't sure if that ego boost was worth the time, and I tried asking it on stories, but I think people misunderstood me. I wasn't asking if it was harder to do or if I should do it that way as a learning opportunity. That is not my goal. I'm not learning anything here, except obviously just figuring out things. What I'm trying here is to test my current skills. So that wasn't the question, and I don't remember what the poll result was, But eventually I decided to sketch out some of the frames and see how long that will take. And since it didn't take me too long, I decided to just draw all the frames. And this kept on going. For the legs, what I did was I animated one leg, and after that I exported the whole thing and imported them into a video editing app to match the legs, because it's kind of annoying to do on Procreate. And after that I got the video, used it as a reference, and mix and match the layers for the second leg. I didn't draw the second leg, I just copy pasted some layers and timed them to fit it. For the arms, I didn't even draw anything. What I did was I took the arc balls that I drew on the side profile and I transformed them to fit in the perspective. And at first I thought, when I looked at the end result, I thought that the reason the arm that is further away from the camera is not properly in perspective was because I got confused when lining it. But now I realize that I fucked it up when sketching. At first I make it go smaller, and then I realized that maybe I made it go smaller. Then what happens is that I overfix it, and now it's just bigger than the arm that is closer to the camera. But in the end I couldn't fix it, because when I realized it, I was at the end, and since it keeps touching the legs, it's really frustrating to fix because there's a lot to be redrawn, so I just kept it that way. And I tried animating the hair, but I gave up on making the head bob because it was going to take too long, and I also wasn't sure at what points it will be down and at what points it will be up. The hair animation looks more like a pulsing motion instead of a swaying in the wind kind of thing, but I learned it in the future. And then once I lined it, I wasn't sure if I was going to just keep this, add flat colors or add shadows. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do and what I had the energy for. So I tried adding the colors to see how long that will take, and it didn't take too long. So then I tried adding the shadows, and that didn't take too long either. And then I added a gradient for the hair, and that didn't take, well, that took a bit long because layers are annoying on Procreate, but I was finished with that too. And I don't know in which order I did these, but I also tried adding color to the lines. I add a red color to the lines, and that didn't take too long because I just alpha locked an airbrush, I think. Or maybe I just clipped an airbrush layer and copied it for all the frames. I think that's what I did. Then I added highlights for the hair. Now I was going to fix that, but I got too lazy and I kept it that way. So this character has no mouth because I was again lazy. But in the end, it looked really cute because of and the shadows on this character are not exactly physically correct shadows. I just add them when drawing the thumbnails to give it some flair, but I don't think they are like in a 3D sense correct. They look nice, so in the end, since the character I was using was cute, I was pretty satisfied with this test. One big lesson that I learned from this was that I need to make sure that before I start lining the final drawings, I need to have everything figured out because I will forget to fix stuff up when I'm lining it. When I'm lining it, I'm usually in like auto mode. I just go over whatever dark line that I see. So that's what caused the cuffs looking very glitchy. I tried fixing some of the wrinkles, but I gave up on fixing the cuffs because it will take too long and I was bored. So definitely I either need to draw really well when sketching and stuff so that I don't need to line, or before I start lining I need to make sure that when the smallest part is figured out, because I am not in the mind to figure stuff out as I line them. And after this, I'm going to try to practice animation. What I have in mind is not much, because unlike drawing matter, I knew what I needed to practice for and how I would practice for that. I don't really know what I need to do for animation. And the first simple exercises that I thought of were to do the 12 principles ball exercises. So I'm going to do those. And after that, I know of the 51 animation exercises list, so maybe I will do that. Or maybe what I will do is roll some actions and animate them. But I don't know if I can make a daily animation exercise, because I'm not sure how long it will take, but this is what I have in mind. And my ultimate exercise idea for the past few years was to roll a character, roll an action, animate the action, either with the character or with just a simple mannequin, and then pick one frame and then color it. I really want to do that, but obviously I'm not at that level yet. But hopefully in the future I will be able to try that out at least once, because maybe it is too big of an exercise to repeat it multiple times, but I want to try it at least once.